Dear ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you on a lecture aiming to open our discussion on speaking up behavior and open disclosure. I will start with a story which might happen anywhere. Lucy worked at a COVID department where it was always busy, as you can imagine. Ambulances waiting at the entrance, doctors running up and down, too many patients, even bad cases, and not enough staff. Fortunately, they got a medicine to treat the worst cases with, let's call it calcium. When they ran out, the company sent in a bigger package than usual. To make the distribution easier, somebody had to divide it into smaller portions. Lucy was responsible for administering the medication to patient. She noticed, however, that after administering it, the patients fell asleep. Her suspicion grew up as she encountered more cases and she went to research the side effects. When she found the original packaging, she was shocked to discover that the label wasn't the same. Instead of calcium to help them recover from COVID, the patients were given Calmium, a drug similar in the name, usually used for sedating patients. Calmium didn't cause any harm, but it prevented them from possible healing if they had taken the correct medicine. Lucy spoke up about the medical error to her nurse manager. We can only speculate what happened after Lucy spoke up. Perhaps she was awarded for her discovery because thanks to her the hospital could correct their mistake. Or, maybe, it caused tension and conflict in her team and she was seen as a troublemaker and shunned by the group. It might be she will be asked by her nurse manager to disclose this incident to patient. In my lecture, I'm inviting you to learn more about Lucy. We will start our journey by asking what is speaking up and why we should speak up in healthcare setting. We will search a little bit if we do speak up in healthcare setting and why we do not speak up. I will continue with some hints how we could facilitate speaking up in healthcare settings, and finally, I will pay attention to open disclosure after adverse event. To avoid confusion, I would like to introduce few terms. If something goes wrong in healthcare, we used to use the medical error, adverse event, patient safety incident, harmful patient safety incident, keeping in mind that not every medical error, patient safety incident, necessarily will result in adverse event or term promoted by WHO harmful patient safety. And not every adverse event is a result of medical error. Another confusion might result from terms speaking up and disclosure. While speaking up is a behavior which takes place within the team and before adverse event, open disclosure is the open communication that takes place between health practitioner and patient after an adverse event. Speaking up is defined as the raising of concerns by healthcare professionals for the benefit of patient safety and care quality upon recognizing or becoming aware of the risky or deficient actions of others within healthcare teams in a hospital environment. In our case, Lucy spotted mismatch of drug used by patient's medication, what is for sure a patient safety incident. Safety concerns that require speaking up include mistakes such as misdiagnosis or poor clinical judgment, rule breaking and failure to follow standardized protocols, like, for example, violating hygiene protocol, medication errors or administration errors, patient management decisions such as delayed transfer to intensive care unit or outdated safety protocols. It refers to raising concerns before an act of commission or omission rather than after it has occurred. So it's not an open disclosure after adverse event, it's not a whistleblowing. Without speaking up, we couldn't learn from mistakes. It's vital to maintaining patient safety. As protect patient is a key ethical and moral mandate for healthcare professionals, they are expected to speak up about safety concerns. Healthcare organizations are either obliged to encourage and empower speaking up in staff of all positions and reinforce their commitment by responding to voiced concern adequately. Staying silent interferes with employees' psychological safety, decrease teamwork among units, increase employee turnover, seize the opportunity to learn and improve. Speaking up is essential to the safe climate of healthcare organization, which has been shown to be a crucial aspect for patient safety. Last but not least, staying silent is related to increased costs. Despite healthcare workers are obliged to speak up, despite it has clear association with patient safety and quality of care, studies in healthcare settings has shown that those who are aware of a problem often either speak up and are ignored, are convinced that their concerns are unfounded, or do not speak up at all. Speaking up is a balancing between being proactive and constructive, while at the same time considering possible inconveniences associated with speaking up. It used to be called high risk and low benefit activity. David Schwapach and Alan Richard explore prevalence of perceived safety concerns, withholding voice and speaking up behavior in 4 hospitals in Switzerland. As you might see, perceived patient safety concerns were quite frequent. 60 to 80% of doctors and nurses reported at least one safety concern during the last 4 weeks. Withholding voice was reported by about a third of them, but if they believe it might prevent safety incident, they were more prone to speak up. Speaking up was reported by more than half of healthcare workers. Go back to Lucy. What might prevent her from speaking up? She might be uncertain that she is right. She might be uncertain to whom and how she should tell about her concerns. She might doubt if her message will be effective, will change anything. She might hesitate if it is her responsibility, if it will not be interfering to somebody else's competence. She might be afraid that she is wrong and she will be seen incompetent, being ashamed. She might be afraid of creating tension or conflict at her unit, being seen as a troublemaker. She might be fed up with poor work conditions and hesitate to add to this pile of problems. She might recall her or somebody else's bad experience with speaking up and be hesitant to undergo that risk. She might feel too young, junior, or subordinated to collect courage for speaking up, or she might be simply too shy. Archana Manapragada and Valentine Brugli wonder what motives healthcare workers have to stay silent about safety issues. They ask them to provide critical incident in which they choose not to address a safety issue that they had witnessed in the workplace and describe why they choose not to address it. They identify 6 motives behind safety silence behavior. Lucy might be afraid that speaking up could lead to a negative perception of her or others will think she is annoying. She might be afraid colleague responsible for drug mismatch may get fired or be under pressure. Relationship with other might be endangered. She might envisage that other might be angry to her and then it might be difficult for her to work with them in the team. Speaking up might not be common at her workplace. Her supervisor might not be fond of it. Safety at the cost of inconveniences associated with speaking up might not be welcomed. Patient just fell asleep and new treatment is either questionable. So, in fact, nobody was really endangered. Nobody was hurt. It's not life-threatening. So, should she and her team undergo such an inconveniences? Finally, Lucy is very busy and exhausted, and it's not in her job prescription. It's not her job to check what was ordered and prepared. She should give an infusion to the patient and not to do a private research in a drug storage. On the other hand, there are also situational barriers preventing speaking up. It's rather common that situation is unclear or ambiguous in healthcare settings, so it might not be easy to be assured what's going on. In healthcare providing, you might want a smooth process, so Lucy might don't want to interrupt other activities. She might perceive low risk of harm from concerning behavior. Nobody died, patients live well, what's wrong? She might be overloaded by duties and tasks, so have no capacity to go and search where are the original packages of drugs. There might be a lack of interdisciplinary hospital policies dealing with the situation. She personally might find it inappropriate. It might not be common at her workplace, and she might miss kind of hospital policy and administrative support. She might be afraid of intimidation following speaking up. There might be steep power gradient at her workplace. She might have a manager who might not find speaking up a good idea. So, how many ticks you collect until now? Isn't it quite bravery demanding behavior? Is it worthy to possible patient safety benefit? An encouraging environment was related to higher speaking up frequency and lower withholding voice frequency in study of Schwabach. On the other hand, when staff members felt there were negative responses to speaking up and nothing would be done about those who acted poorly, they used to resign and are more prone to withhold voice. Culture of safety is much better option for patients, healthcare workers and institutions than culture of fear. Ayoko Okuyama and his team identified various factors that influence speaking up by healthcare professionals and integrated these factors into a Morrison model of employee voice. Motivation to speak up to help the patient is higher if perceived risk for patient is higher, and also if there is a low ambiguity of the clinical situation. Nurses tend to voice their concerns when hospital policies openly support their positions, are experiencing more collegial practice, when people are treated with kindness and respect, when there is a good team work and attitude of team leader is supportive with regard to speaking up. Besides contextual factors, individual factors play a role as well. Those satisfied with their work, having a sense of responsibility toward patients, better identified with their roles of professional, feeling more confident based on previous positive experiences, with good communication skills and higher education, are more prone to speak up. Moreover, they have to feel safe and efficient in given conditions to put motive to speak up into the action. They might collect more information, ask for consultation, or provide observation to clarify the situation. They might think over whom to approach, how to approach, and with what message, while showing positive intent should not be missing. This act results in some outcomes, and usually there are already some experiences from speaking up in past. As we don't want Lucy to end up as this man being abandoned, ostracized, and giving up hope for human potential, what we could do to establish and promote safety culture to facilitate speaking up behavior. We need skills and courage to speak up. Training of assertiveness, particularly when implemented early in education, might equip healthcare workers with necessary skills. But we need also a setting with established and promoted safety culture to encourage them to use these skills. Graded assertiveness should be a win-to-win approach which allows a junior person to avoid conflict or triggering defensiveness initially, but allow them to escalate if required. And in the same time, it gives the senior person a chance to correct any mistakes or misunderstandings and to save face. You might find at least following three techniques of graded assertiveness. The first one, KUS, starts with expressing concerns. Lucy might say, I'm concerned that patients might not get appropriate medication. Then she might escalate and say, I'm unsure with sedative effect of given medication. It's strange. If no response, she might continue. It's not safe to apply this medication until we double check. And finally, she might escalate her concern and say, stop what you are doing, I'm going to call manager to ask for double check. Another technique is space, and in this case, Lucy will firstly need to gain attention or raise the concern, so we might She might probe to ask, do you know that patients are getting sleep after medication which should not have a sedative effect? Then she might need to repeat the concern and increase the volume to alert partner, saying, for example, you know, I'm not sure about this medication, and if it's wrong, it might cause a health problem. If no appropriate response, she should formally state concerns and challenge the individual decision, so she might say, your approach will harm patients. Finally, she should assure that she have an eye contact and escalate to emergency action, asking to stop action or to take over the task. Finally, five-step advocacy starts with getting attention, expressing concern, setting the problem, suggesting solution, and asking for help, asking for agreement. Recent study of Julia Hansen team showed that teaching assertiveness skills and establishing a preparatory framework for speaking up for safety early in a nursing students can have important psychological implications for their confidence, empowerment, and success. The two-challenge rule has roots in aviation industry, and it's based on assumption that all members of the team, even subordinates, share responsibility for a safe outcome and are obliged to speak up when actions don't seem right. In US Army aviation, for example, the rule is described as follows. The two-challenge rule allows one crew member to automatically assume the duties of another crew member who fails to respond to two consecutive challenges. For example, the pilot on the control becomes fixated, confused, task overloaded, or otherwise allows the aircraft to enter an unsafe position or attitude. The pilot not on the control first asks the pilot on the control if he is aware of the aircraft position or attitude. If the pilot on the control doesn't acknowledge this challenge, the pilot not on the control issue a second challenge. If the pilot on the control fails to acknowledge the second challenge, the pilot not on the control assumes control of the aircraft. In healthcare setting, it might be that one person will express concern saying, I see that you plan to administer a spinal anesthetic to this patient. She has a platelet count of 80,000. I learned that we shouldn't do a spinal unless the count was at least 100,000. Can you clarify your view? If no answer or a nonsensical answer is received from the attending faculty anesthesiologist, the trainee might say, I see that you plan to administer a spinal anesthetic, but I worry her platelets are too low. I think it's unsafe and we should do a general anesthetic. What do you think? Again, if no appropriate answer, the person should seek additional help to protect the patient and resolve the disagreement. Do you see any difference between aviation and medical teams? What might not work in healthcare setting? Yes, you are right. Pilot and copilot are equally capable to take over the duties, while in the case of junior doctor or nurse versus senior doctor, it's not like that. They could only call for external assistance. It will not work without respectful responsiveness of senior doctor when safety concern is raised. How could we cultivate a culture of safety, culture of speaking up in organization? We might raise awareness while talking with staff frequently and positively about speaking up. Establish a culture of speaking up supported by leadership and sustainable policies and practices might be necessary before we ask staff to speak up to avoid their poor experiences. It should include also reviewing the chain of command policies so that all staff know their options if facing problems. Training, including role-playing activities, might help staff to explore how to handle difficult situations. It's very helpful to share the stories of situations where speaking up protected patients or stories where remaining silent was a factor in patient harm. We should not just share the stories, but also praising these who speak up appropriately. And finally, providing clear support for clinical staff in all serious events. Imagine that Lucy and her nurse manager agreed that Lucy should inform patients affected by drug mismatch. If speaking about patient safety incident within the team of colleagues might face so many barriers, what a difficulties then an open disclosure to patient and his family about harmful patient safety incident might face. Lucy might want to provide accurate and timely information about what has happened, but she might be afraid that she will be confronted with angry patient or family member and that this will result in litigation. She will be investigated and they might use everything she will disclose in suing process against her. Study of Charles Vincent et al. Identify following four main group of patients' reasons leading to litigation. Patients sue the doctors as they wish to see staff disciplined and called to account, so accountability. They want explanation, what is a combination of wanting an explanation and feeling ignored or neglected after incident. They wish to ensure that a similar incident didn't happen again. They ask for standard of care. And they might want compensation and an admission of negligence. Not just harm caused by medical error, but mainly insensitive handling and poor communication create a fuel for wanting litigation. And it might not happen if open disclosure will follow K principles. Patients or relatives should be provided with information about what happened in a timely, open and honest manner. Doctor or nurse should acknowledge the incident and express regret for any harm that resulted from an incident. They should avoid speculative statements, admission of liability, or apportioning of blame. The case will undergo investigation. The patient and/or his/her family should be fully informed of the facts surrounding an incident and its consequences, should be treated with empathy, respect, and consideration, and should be supported in a manner appropriate to their needs. Reasonable expectation of the first victim should be recognized and acknowledged with respect. Healthcare organizations should create an environment in which all staff are encouraged and able to recognize and report incidents. They should be prepared through training and education to participate in open disclosure, and they should be supported through the open disclosure process. Then, there should be the steps taken to manage the event and prevent its recurrence. First victim should receive the explanation of the steps which will be taken to keep high standards of care, prevent error in the future, and account what happened. Policies and procedures should be developed by healthcare organizations with full consideration for first, but also second victim privacy and confidentiality. Summarizing, at a minimum, an open disclosure process must include an apology or expression of regret, a factual explanation of what occurred, including actual consequences and opportunity for the affected patient to relate their experience, and the steps taken to manage the event and prevent its recurrence. I didn't mention yet one very important context, and it's what lay public know about it, what they think about it, what are their expectations, how this issue is discussed in media. Whatever ambitious goal you will set and follow as healthcare worker or healthcare providing organization to meet expectations of your clients, patients and their families will depend on how realistic their expectations are, what your clients know and expect with regard to medical errors. Everybody is doing errors on a daily basis and we are quite ready to accept it. But it's not a case of medical errors. You might say, of course not. It hardly could be equal to forgotten keys at home or missing to take home children from kindergarten, because it might cause harm on our health. It might be life-threatening. It might cost us life. No, medical errors are not acceptable at all. Let me to tell you a story of Tatiana, who crossed Vltava River on 350-meter long rope at height of 35 meters in Prague a few years ago. Amazing lady. Unbelievable performance. She did it without safety belt, so any error could cost you life in any second. This is exactly the case when we are not prone to accept that errors might happen. She arrived to Prague a few weeks ago with her team. Her team analyzed the situation, set a plan, and discover there is over their capacity, so they hire some more colleagues to be able to build rope constructions. Another team works on administrative and legal issues. As you can imagine, to build rope constructions over the river and to arrange such performance requires a lot of documentations, approvals, papers and stamps. Tatiana was preparing and she did several trials, some of them with serious problems, so she has to stop, connect her safety belt and wait for help. A man who, when he spot her signaling the problem, immediately go to bring her another rope to transport her downstairs to the safety. Her coach came to Prague to support her and to advise her. As music helped her to concentrate, there was a jazz band ready to play a music during a performance for her. The day she should do her performance, a team of volunteers was hired to watch nobody will go too close to rope construction to prevent any unwanted balance of the constructions, which might increase the risk of Tatiana. Finally, she walked on the rope, with river underneath, with silhouettes of 100-towered city behind her, music playing just for her, and a crowd of people admiring her bravery and mastery, breathless in any imbalance of her walk, and welcoming her cordially, recognizing how extraordinary this performance is when any error could cost a life. So we do it when Tatiana is walking a rope. We are aware of error might happen when such a perfect conditions and support is available. We have a floor for understanding, recognizing, appreciating, so why not when it's a daily routine of healthcare workers? They are on a rope every day. Not just surgeons, but also GPs are doing everyday decisions which might cause harm or cost life if any error will occur. If there is a problem with rope constructions, if there is some sudden changes, if they didn't spot something, if they didn't ask something, if they misunderstood, whatever could happen. In healthcare setting, it's not true that those who do nothing wrong, because not providing healthcare or defensive medicine endangers the health and life of the patient even more. Just like the Tatiana, healthcare workers need a stable rope construction, supportive team, and generous audience.